Hi, I'm Ben Felder with the Oklahoman. Joining me also with the Oklahoman is Andrew Knittle. And Andrew and I have been spending the last couple of weeks taking a look at the use of lead piping in Oklahoma City and surrounding cities. Obviously, the issue of lead in water has been increased in attention with what's happened in Flint, Michigan. People paying a lot more attention to lead piping and the possible risks with water with lead getting in the water. Before we talk about Oklahoma City, Andrew, you spent some time looking at suburban cities here in the metro to see, one, are they using lead, and then two, how much lead piping they have. What did you find?
That's right. We contacted 8 suburbs: Norman, Edmond, Yukon, El Reno, Moore, Del City, Midwest City, and Shawnee. And we were not expecting anything, but found that most of them, 5 out of those 8, still have some level of lead pipes. No water mains per se, but like the pipes that run from the main to the meter,
those
or
service lines,
or even on the private residences. Yeah, so 5 of those cities: Norman, Yukon, El Reno, Edmond, Shawnee, they all had some lead pipes. Though how many they had wasn't exactly clear. Only one city was specific. El Reno said they had 88 lead pipes. We don't know how long those are, exactly what that means, but they, those five suburbs, they still have lead pipes because a lot of those places were developed, 100 years ago or so, when that kind of thing, lead pipes were still being used. But for the most part, we learned that lead in the water and the drinking water is not a concern. And that's what we found in the suburbs. So I'm not sure about Oklahoma City.
Yeah, so one of the things I took a look at in Oklahoma City is actually cities are required to test for lead every 3 years. And so a city the size of Oklahoma City is required to test 50 taps. I mapped those 50 taps from 2015 and 2012, the last 2 cycles of tests, to see where they're testing at. My story dives in a little bit more into areas of the city where there hasn't been as much testing and kind of the reasons behind that. But yeah, you're right. Those tests are coming back showing that there's no risk of lead right now in the city. Oklahoma City has actually replaced quite a bit of lead piping. 3,258 lead service lines have been replaced in the city since 1993, and they told me that they're finding about 60 of those service lines a year, and when they find them, they replace them. But these are pipes that are underground. It's not always, there's not always the best data on what exists, especially when you're talking about pipes that are over 100 years old.
Right, and that's the same thing we found out, or when we looked at the suburbs. They replace them when they find them, and you get the same comment over and over again. Well, we can't just dig them up to see. So yeah, but like Oklahoma City, the suburbs, those public works departments, they've been replacing when they find them as well. So, and that's been going on for decades.
Yeah, unlike a lot of attention towards Flint, other cities in kind of the Northeast United States, cities that have pipes that are sometimes 200 years old. So in this case, it seems like Oklahoma and Oklahoma City's relatively young age has really helped us kind of avoid this issue, like we're seeing in other cities.
Absolutely.
You mentioned the water mains and service lines, and I think you found the same thing, that most cities are saying that they don't have lead in those water mains, those main lines that are going, taking water from the treatment facility to neighborhoods. Oklahoma City did say that they had some lead solder used in some of the joint connections, but it's really in those service lines. And by service lines, we're talking about connecting the water main to the house, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, one last thing that I thought was interesting is when we talk about service lines, there's 2 types. There's a service line that the city owns, that if they find it's lead, they'll replace. The service line that goes from the meter box to the house is actually owned by the customer, and if that's found, that's on the customer's responsibility to replace.
Yeah, that was the same in all the cities I spoke to as well.
Yeah, so a package of stories running on March 28th in the Oklahoman by Andrew and myself, taking a look at the issue of lead piping and water. I think the 2 biggest takeaways here is that there are some lead pipes still in use in the metro, not as much as in other cities. And second, it doesn't seem to be a big issue in terms of lead poisoning in the water. We didn't find any cases of that. Water is safe to drink. Yeah, well, for Andrew in the Oklahoman, I'm Ben Felder.